Hey there YouTube fans, this is White Fang Talks coming back again with another video. We're going to stick with the theme of logos and specifically defined in the Christian tradition as logos and historically Greek. And so we've got an article from creation.com, Creation Ministries International, in front of us. And this is done by Augusto Zimmermann. And as we read the top headline, The Christian Foundations of the Rule of Law in the West, a Legacy of Liberty and Resistance Against Tyranny. So we're going to have a look at a little video later as well, because as we are aware that the Western world has become so secularized and so atheistic, and those are been known to be markers in the 20th century for the rising up of tyranny. So this is quite a lengthy article, but it's absolutely worth it. It opens your mind. I'll go through the abstract and the top bit so you guys can see what I'm talking about. So if we read the abstract and we'll read according to the tradition of the rule of law in the West, to be under the law presupposes the existence of certain laws serving as an effective check on arbitrary power. The rule of law is therefore far more than mere existence of positive laws, as it also requires the state to act in accordance with the principles of a higher law. The search for such higher law implies, however, a moral discussion on what laws ought to be. If so, the rule of law becomes an impracticable and even undesirable achievement for societies not subject to certain patterns of cultural and religious behavior. On the other hand, any radical change in such patterns can certainly produce undesirable consequences for the realization of the rule of law. So, yeah, so if we read this abstract, it's saying that the law of especially the West, and as laid out by the government, must be subject to a higher law, because therefore otherwise arbitrary laws can just be made by the state as they please, and they are not beholden to a higher law. And this is what this whole article deals with. And if we go further down, we get to the nitty-gritty. So this passage, paragraph says, the Bible has been historically recognized as the most important book for the development of both the rule of law and the democratic institutions in the Western world. However, we have seen over the last decades a deep erosion of individual rights with the growth of state power over the life and liberty of individuals. If the future we want for ourselves and our future generation is one of freedom under law, not absolute subjection to the arbitrary will of human authorities, we will have to restore the biblical foundations for the rule of law in the Western world. As such, the rule of law talks about the protection of the individual by God-given liberties rather than by an all-powerful law-giving government endowed by godlike powers over the civil society. And I mean, when you read it like that, it just makes complete sense, because as human beings, we are always subject to the lust for power, wanting to be in control and wanting to dictate to others. And that lust for power has to be kept in check by a higher power than ourselves, i.e. by the Christian God and by the Christian teachings, i.e. by the Bible, full stop. So, and by the erosion of these principles, and by the secularizing the culture and the institutions, we are losing our liberties and our individual rights as God-given liberties, not by. See, this is the thing what people need to understand, is that if you have any rights at all, they're not given to you by the state or by government, because they're just other humans. Never mind they're in charge of the army and the police, they're just other humans. God gives you your rights. So the government is meant to protect your God-given rights. That's their job. But that can only be their job is if we stick to biblical principles, if we stick to the Bible. So, I mean, like I said, this article is a hefty one, and it's long, but it's so eye-opening. And you can, if you want, you can comment down in the comment section, and I can send you the link, or actually I'll put the link into the description, so you guys can check it out for yourself. But we'll have a look at a video, and yeah, and I'll see you guys again soon. Bye. This is White Fang Talks. Thank you.
Doug, in a recent episode of the All of Christ podcast, there was a talk called Worship as Warfare from a conference in 2007. In the message, you talked about Francis Fukuyama's essay, The End of History. You mentioned that the only thing that had a chance of giving Western liberal democracy a run for its money was Christianity or Islam. So we're 13 years later now. If you were to do this again, would your talk change at all in emphasis or direction?
It would not change in direction. I think that we're 13 years into the continued unraveling of the secular liberal order. Mm-hmm. So I probably want to change. I probably have more recent examples or things to point to, but I think basically the secular liberal order was parasitic from the beginning. It needed the host of a Christendom, a previously Christian civilization, that it could draw on the resources of and pretend that they had invented all this themselves. But they have been successfully secularizing so many things and forcing Christians to go private, stay private, keep it out of the public square, that they're having to come up with their own gasoline for their own cars now, and they don't have it. They can't sustain it. And the Muslims, radical Muslims, wake up in the morning knowing exactly what they think, exactly what they believe. And so the secular Democrats have no answer for that kind of brash confidence. And I think that the only third alternative would be for Christians to recover their confidence, which is part of their heritage, but which has been beaten out of us or trained out of us over the last century and a half.
In that transition from, you had this Christendom that faded, and the parasite has taken over, and now it's the maggot is the living thing. In that transition, is there a moment or a point or an age that you point to where you say, I think this is when it happened, or it was during this century that everything happened?
Well, I think that it became sort of it became manifest to the world in the aftermath of the First World War. So the form of Christendom was still intact. There was a very impressive shell going into the First World War, and everybody knew at the end of the war that the gods were gone. And so I would say that's when it became evident to everybody. I would point to other earlier mile markers, the Enlightenment, Darwin's Origin of Species. There were certain things that got placed, so they were sort of like time bombs that were placed earlier, but people sort of accommodated and did a workaround. So Darwin lived his life basically in a largely Christian order, while the virus of his views were eating everything out. But it wasn't until the First World War that it became obvious that Christendom as a living project was not viable anymore.
Thanks.